Hi everyone, it is Jana from the Bath Township Public Library and April is National Poetry Month. Woohoo! Yeah, I know. A lot of you are thinking right now, yeah, I don't care that it's National Poetry Month. I get it because I'm one of those people too. Poetry is really not my first choice of reading material. Um, I have horrible nightmares of trying to analyze Wordsworth in high school and having no clue what any of it means. I think poetry has a tendency to make a lot of us feel stupid because we think that there's supposed to be this great meaning and we're just not smart enough to understand it. But poetry does not have to be that way. It doesn't have to be difficult to read. It can be fun, it can be silly, it can be sad, and it can be a great choice. Um, I'm going to talk about a specific form of poetry today. I'm going to talk about novels in verse. Um, so we're starting to see a lot of novels in verse written, especially for like teens and middle grades. It's a growing genre, I would say, and it gets neglected a lot. I think there's great books, they win lots of awards, they get great reviews, and they don't get checked out. Well, why not? First of all, I think, yes, it's this misconception of what poetry is, that it's hard, that it's boring, so kids don't want to read it, especially boys. Boys have this feeling, poetry is a girl thing. Not true. Um, Also, sometimes I've seen parents kids pick up novels in verse and parents tell them, well, that's not like, no, you need to challenge yourself. That's too short. That's too easy. That's not a real book. Um, and, and unfortunately it's because, there's a lot of white space on the page, there's shorter sentences, the books tend to be shorter or take a lot less time to read. So there's this misconception too that they're not challenging enough for kids, and they can be challenging. Anytime you read outside your preferred genre, it can be a challenge. It can be something new, and just trying something new can be hard. But you also need to know that novels in verse can be amazing stories with characters and settings that can really draw you in and are just as great as traditional novels. They're also a great choice for struggling or reluctant readers, kids that don't like to read as much. And this is really because like you look at a book like this and it's like super thick. And so, this is a teen novel. And so they're going to be like, oh no, I can't read something that's way too long for me. I hate to read. But then you open it up and you're like, oh, look at all that glorious white space on the page. And for a reluctant reader, a kid that doesn't like to read or feels like they're not a good reader, all that white space can be very comforting to know, like, hey, I'm not going to be reading this for eternity. It's not going to take me months and months to struggle through a single chapter of this book. I could actually finish a whole novel. And that can be a really empowering feeling for somebody who doesn't enjoy reading or struggles with reading. So those are great reasons to choose novels in verse. So first, I'm going to talk about a couple of novels in verse written for middle grades. The first of these is Love That Dog, and this is by Sharon Creech. And Sharon Creech is a fantastic author who has written a number of books for middle grades. She writes a lot of novels in verse. This one is called Love That Dog. Um, and it starts out, and I said, boys are the first to say that they don't want to read poetry. And this book starts out with the boy saying, I don't want to because boys don't write poetry. Girls do. And that is his response when his teacher tells him he needs to write a poem for class. And the whole book is him, really struggling with this idea that he does not like poetry and does not want to write it, but then finds out that he's really good at writing poetry, and his teacher is actually really impressed with his writing skills, and it turns out to be a great way to express what he feels, and something that he has gone through, a traumatic event for him. He ends up being very inspired by a poem by Walter Dean Myers, who is another amazing author for teens and middle grade kids. And so he's really inspired by a specific poem of Walter Dean Myers, and he begins writing Walter Dean Myers. And he writes a poem kind of based on one of Walter Dean Myers, and he writes a poem about his dog. I'm going to warn you, This is a, a tearjerker. So it's a beautiful story. It's a great introduction to novels in verse because it is really, really short and a fast read. But yeah, you will be a sobbing puddle by the end, trust me. She also has a sequel to Love That Dog, and it is Hate That Cat. And this is also a novel in verse about the same character, and he is in the next grade at this point. And he is still writing poetry, which is great to see a young boy wanting to write poetry. Now, kind of sticking with this theme that poetry really, it's not all love sonnets by Shakespeare. It can be about any subject that you might enjoy. We're going to talk about Kwame Alexander, who is an awesome writer. He wrote The Crossover, which of course won the Newbery Medal. And it has a number of sequels. It has Booked, and I'm blanking on the other one, but there is another one about these same characters. And you may be aware that they are casting now for the Disney series based on The Crossover. So once again, this is a novel in verse, so you can see like lots of beautiful white space. He really does a great job of, obviously this crossover involves basketball. He does just a great job of incorporating a lot of sound, you know, and the text going kerplunk and a thunderous dunk. And I mean, you really hear, you feel, you know, the squeaky shoes on a court and the thumping of the dribbling of the ball. And it's just some beautiful, amazing imagery that really involves all your senses. The story is about twin boys who are very, very good at basketball. The story is told from the point of view of Josh, one of the twins. And it's not just about basketball though, even though that is a huge part of the twins' life is playing basketball, and their father was a former professional player. So that's always been a huge part of their life. But also, you know, they're 13 and they're changing. And, you know, Josh feels like he's kind of losing his brother Jordan because Jordan suddenly is into girls, and there's stuff going on with their father having some health concerns. And so, you know, yeah, there's basketball involved, but there's so much more. It's really a story about growing up and, you know, your brother and your parents and, you know, friendships and all those different things that, you know, every kid goes through, whether they play basketball or not. I actually made my daughter read this, and she is one who, at the time when she read this, she read really nothing but fantasy. If there was not like unicorns or mermaids or wizards, then she was not going to read it. And so I encouraged her to read this book, and she loved it. She was like, I can't believe I read a sports book and liked it, because she is not one that likes sports at all. So even though it does have a basketball player on the cover, and basketball is a big part of it, it's about a lot more than basketball. Now, Kwame Alexander has also written some novels in verse for teens, and one of those is Solo. This one, as with the basketball theme, Kwame does such an amazing job of incorporating sounds. Solo is about a boy who plays the guitar. He is a senior, you know, he's growing up. He is the son of kind of a drug addict, former rock star who's like super famous, and, you know, but he's dealing with all those issues of, you know, yeah, he's got money, but, you know, his mom is gone. You know, his dad is in and out of rehab and very irresponsible, not really a great involved father, and dealing with that. And you know, and just also incorporating his own musical talents. He's a very talented musician, but he's overshadowed by his father's success and fame, and dealing with all that. And it's just a really wonderful story. I'm not going to give anything away, but you know, he really does make a journey, you know, of growing up and changing. And I know it's probably not a story many of us can relate to. I mean, I don't know very many people that are the sons or daughters of rock stars, but we can all relate to those feelings of insecurity and finding first love and trying to discover yourself, and, you know, separating from your parents as you grow up and graduate from high school and things. So just beautiful, beautiful story. And like I said, it's, fun to read something that's not going to take you forever to read. Even if you like to read, sometimes you might not want to commit to something that's going to take you weeks to read, or, you just want something fast and fun, and novels in verse can be a great choice for that because they aren't a huge time commitment. Now, also for teens, this one is called The Poet X, and this is by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is about a Dominican girl. Her parents are Dominican, and she is living in the Bronx. And, her mother is extremely religious, and it creates a lot of conflict, and her parents fight a lot, and she has a twin brother, and they are very different. And she, of course, is growing up and changing, and she's interested in boys, and and her mother wants her to have nothing to do with boys and to make sure she only focuses on studies. It was a very interesting novel to read. Obviously, I am not from an urban, city area or anything like that. So it's always exciting to read something set in a place you're not familiar with, and to learn about cultures and people and places that you just don't know about. And this was one of those stories that I read this in one sitting. I read this like in about an hour. You just get sucked in, and you want to know what's going to happen to Ziamara next, where she's going in life. And this is a great one. She really finds her voice. She's in high school, and she discovers slam poetry. Slam poetry is performance poetry. It's a contest, like you're given so much time and you perform your poetry to an audience, and there's audience participation, and it's how your cadence and how you say things. And like I said, it's a competition. And Elizabeth Acevedo is an amazing competitor in slam poetry, and her character Ziamara finds slam poetry and finds that it's an avenue for her to express who she is and who she wants to be. So I encourage anybody, if you read this, then also to try watching some slam poetry on YouTube. Maybe teens will be encouraged to try their own. Even if you don't enter a competition, give it a whirl. The great thing about slam poetry is there's, other than like time and performing it, live, there's no requirements as far as what kind of poetry. It can be free verse, it can rhyme, it cannot rhyme, it can kind of be whatever you want it to be. The message can be what you want it to be and what you want to say. So that's, I think, for people that think that poetry has all these rules. And I know we learn about a lot of different kinds of poems when we're in school. We learn how to do a haiku and different things like that. They have certain syllables and iambic pentameters and all those things. Slam poetry is really about being free and, saying what you want to say, how you want to say it. And if that's using a rhyme scheme or not, so be it. So that is The Poet X. This one, I only have the graphic novel version that just came out, but obviously there is the original novel in verse one of Long Way Down. This really is probably one of the best novels in verse that I've ever read. Just the story is so unique, the way it's told. You kind of have this, is it a ghost story? Is it not a ghost story? Is he imagining things? The main character, his brother is recently killed in like this senseless shooting, and he decides he is going to get revenge. And so he gets a gun, and then he gets into the elevator of his building. And as he goes down each floor, somebody enters the elevator with him, and it is somebody from his past that was in some way a victim of violence, and kind of talking to him and making him remember all these feelings of losing this person and dealing with this loss, and other people that just lost their lives because of just senseless violence. But then once again, are these ghosts? Is he imagining them? And the author kind of really leaves it up to you to decide this. It's beautifully written. It's a great commentary about gun violence and how it continues to perpetuate. like with vengeance, like, and what is the point of vengeance? Like, you know, does it have a point? It really is beautifully gets that across, the senselessness of needing revenge and what that's actually going to get you. And Jason Reynolds, sorry, not Jason Alexander from Seinfeld. Jason Reynolds is one of my favorite teen and middle grade authors. He's just such a fantastic person. Like, I recommend watching him speak on YouTube or wherever you can, he's done some amazing interviews to watch. He really became inspired to be a writer from like reading the lyrics of like Queen Latifah on the inside of like cassette cases. And just what a great role model and an activist and a writer. And I can't say enough about Jason Reynolds and his books, but this one is particularly fantastic. So whether you read the graphic novel or the original, either one are just amazing. And excerpt of Jason Reynolds' poems, For Everyone, is currently featured on the ALA, the official American Library Association National Poetry Month posters. And For Everyone, it's like 100 pages, and it's kind of like my new go-to to get for graduates, because I think it just has so many wonderful messages to moving to a new point in your life. So I recommend too checking that one out. It's a beautiful poem, really, for anybody to read, to inspire you, to make you realize like the importance of dreams, and they don't have to be dreams to be a rock star or a famous athlete or famous writer. You know, your dream could be to be a teacher or to be a mom or a dad, and those are important dreams too, and they are worth going after and just as significant to the world. It's just a beautiful message, I think, especially for, you know, graduates that are moving on to that next part of their lives, and like that whatever they want to do is wonderful and they should go after it. So I'm going to talk now about a book. This is kind of, okay. This is called Bull, and it is by David Elliott, and it is based on the myth of the Minotaur, which I know a lot of us have heard of the Minotaur at the middle of the labyrinth. So I've read this described as Hamilton meets Greek mythology, and if that doesn't encourage you to go out and read it, I don't know what will. This is truly such a unique book. Now, I would say it was published for teens, but I would definitely recommend it for older teens and adults. If you are familiar at all with like traditional Greek myths, like the real myths, most of them are very risque. And you know, based on, you know, how the Minotaur was born, that it was this curse of Poseidon on the king of the island of Crete, how he came to be. It is definitely a little bit of an adult story, but it's really beautifully told. Usually, you know, you hear the story of the Minotaur, and Theseus is always this great hero, and the Minotaur is just this monster. And this story really shows how sad and lonely and just really heartbreaking the story of Asterion, who is, you know, the bull, the Minotaur, how sad his story is. And he's, you know, he is a punishment. His whole life is a punishment to, you know, the king of Minos and his mother, and you know, and he didn't deserve it. You know, I mean, he is meant to be the punishment to Minos, but like you think of his life and, you know, what he had to go through, and it's, you know, it's horribly unfair and tragic, his life. What really makes this story unique is that David Elliott actually uses, you know, you have Poseidon and you have Asterion. He uses a different poetic form for each character. So Poseidon has a different way of speaking than does Daedalus, and does Asterion, does Ariadne, his sister. In the back, he talks about each of these different poetic forms that he chose. So if you want to read that, you can. I'm not going to go into the details of like what their rhyme scheme was. What I will tell you is by giving them kind of this unique voice, when you're reading it, the characters sound different. They each have their unique way of talking. And it really helps you visualize the characters of people, as different people, how kind of their sentence structure and how it changes. His mother ends up going crazy, so her stuff is kind of like all over the place. Poseidon is, of course, very much in charge and very snarky and can kind of do whatever he wants. So he is one, he doesn't necessarily stick to one form. Whereas Daedalus talks in rhyming couplets. And so I can't even imagine how difficult it must have been to write this and to keep them all straight and to stick to those forms for each of the characters. But it's definitely effective in telling the story. It makes it so compelling to read. I'd love to see it performed. I think this would just make, like I said, it's Hamilton meets Greek mythology. I think this would make an amazing performance. I would love to see this on stage because, like I said, I really love the focus on the Minotaur and his story, versus always being on Theseus, the hero who slays the Minotaur. But definitely a unique one. The final one I'm going to talk about is, and I've only kind of read parts of this so far because I haven't had time to read the whole thing because we actually just got this in at the library. It's just published this year. This is called How Far Have You Have Come, and it is by Morgan Harper Nichols, who is really just a fabulous author, and she writes music and very, very talented. This story is different in that there's artwork, there's poems, there's also parts that are just written in prose where she kind of talks about where she was in her life at that point. She kind of talks about like how she took, as a child, they would travel from Georgia to California to visit family on a family vacation. And, later on in life, she kind of took this road trip, her and her husband trying to make it in the world of music and, struggling and the struggles that they went through. And it's really about, enjoying the journey that you're on, even when it's difficult, which is not always easy for any of us to do. Sometimes we feel like I'm never going to get where I want to be. I've wasted all this time of my life. Why haven't I reached anywhere yet? And, really focusing on that journey and enjoying every moment that we're in for what it is and how each of those moments, even when they're hard, they make us who we are. And that's special. And it's special to remember those small moments, those quiet moments, those seemingly unimportant moments. I know one part that really, really stuck out to me is I will not let the pulse of the clock dictate the pulse of my life. And just really meant something to me, just being like, sometimes we're in such a hurry to rush to get things done and to get somewhere. And I need to finish this now. And I need to be at this point in my life now. And I think I really struggled that much more when I was younger, thinking I had to achieve all these certain things by a certain age. And, and to remember, now that I am older, it's, you also need to enjoy the journey. And that's just as important as arriving at some point of success in your career or in your life. Getting there is also important. So those are the novels in verse that I have. There's some others that I don't have copies of here. I highly recommend also the Crank novels. I believe there's 3 in the Crank trilogy by Ellen Hopkins. These are loosely based on her daughter's struggles with meth addiction. She said before that they're 60% truthful based on that story. Really, really powerful. Once again, definitely for older teens, dealing with pregnancy and abuse and rape and drug addiction and a lot of different themes like that are difficult, but very, very powerfully told in free verse. So those are definitely ones to check out. There's a lot of young ones also for younger kids. Out of the Dust is by Karen Hesse, and that is about the Great Depression. It's a beautifully written story. Once again, it's written in verse, so it doesn't take you very long to read. I know you're probably thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna read poetry and history now? No, but actually it's a great way to learn, and it's a great way to get the real feel of what it was like to be in the Depression, you know, without the dryness of a textbook or, you know, the time commitment of this long, you know, Grapes of Wrath, you know, something you can read in a short time, which can be amazing to not have to, you know, to read something new and not have it take weeks or weeks. So that is, you know, and there are lots of others. Please feel free to share some of your favorite novels in verse, or come to the library and check some out. Go to your local library and check some out. But it is a really fun format to try. And no better month than National Poetry Month to try it. Thank you.